What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.
Hello, Avaya family. I am Brielle Starr, online education coordinator for Avaya. Avaya is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Francesca Maxime, is with us today to talk about cultivating relational balance. Francesca is a Haitian Dominican Italian American somatic experiencing practitioner, certified mindfulness meditation teacher, relational life therapy couples and life coach, and award winning poet and author. Welcome back to Avaya, Francesca.
Thank you so much, Briella. It's lovely to see you again.
Yes, it's so lovely to have you here with us at Avaya yet again. And I'm so excited to speak with you today about this concept of cultivating relational balance. And so, just to get it started, could you explain to us how we can actually know or recognize when our nervous system is dysregulated?
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate this question so much because that's what I try to work with clients on as a somatic coach and also a licensed somatic psychotherapist. So um, it's it's interesting. A lot of psychotherapy historically, based on Freudian psychoanalysis, Western psychotherapy, it was sort of the talking cure. They started with, the mind and kind of what you're thinking and exploring what they would call drives and, origins around different kind of um, complexes that people might have in terms of relationships to their parents and things like that. And we've moved, especially in the last, I'd say 40 years, um, in the neuroscience and in the nervous system sort of understanding of the way mammals respond to safety and threat in their environment or perceived safety and threat and that whole idea of the body having a reaction of fight, flight, freeze, submit, fix, like different kinds of things that the body of a mammal, and as humans, we're human mammals, that we will try to orient toward safety or perceived safety at any given time. And this is, sort of evolutionary thing. The animals want to survive in the wild. When they're about to get attacked by the lion, they might try to run away. If they are stuck in a certain situation, they might actually engage and try to fight. Um, if they are aware that there's a threat looming that may not have spied them yet, they may freeze and kind of shut down. If they think they're about to actually be eaten, they might collapse and just kind of play dead or be still because that floods our system with, chemicals that sort of numb us out in a way. And if we don't actually get eaten, the animal kind of shakes it off and wakes up and kind of goes forward and on with life. The antelope kind of returns to the herd. But with humans, we kind of get a little traumatized by that, and we may adopt that kind of frozen state. Or the other states that I talked about, we may adopt that fleeing state or that fighting state if we have an experience where, when confronted with conflict or difficulty or challenge or some perception of threat, that we notice a whoosh in response to your original question, how do you know if you're out of balance? There's some kind of a whoosh thing that might happen where you just feel flooded, you feel stuck, you feel frozen, you feel like you impulsively want to lean in and punch somebody's lights out or yell at the guy driving next to you or you feel like you have to escape and go in the other room. And I have clients tell me all the time, like, my husband did this or that or whatever and I just wanted to run away. Or that these things are like feelings that you would start to notice and identify in your throat, in your chest, in your belly, in your shoulders. And they might be a tingling sensation or a spiky sensation, or you might feel a lot of heat here if you feel anxious and worried and fearful. Um, so we're starting to tune into listening and feeling into the language of the body and what the body's telling us. So it's usually just some people feel like when they say, I have a pit in my stomach, that's how you know there's something going on. I have a feeling of tightness in my chest. That's how you know there's something going on. So we start to pay attention to that, and then we ask our body, well, what's the story of that? What are you afraid of? What are you sad about? That kind of thing. And we start to actually start an inner dialogue with parts of ourselves that are holding a lot of these fears and hopes to return to a place of perceived safety or actual safety, but are feeling a little bit stuck in this kind of caught somatic response.
Yeah, thank you for giving us a little bit of background on how we can actually begin to recognize when we are in this state of dysregulation. And you mentioned this concept, that one example of a woman who felt like she wanted to run away from her husband if there was like an argument of some kind or an event that happened. And so, since we're talking about, relation today as it relates to our nervous system, could you tell us about how people show up relationally with one another when they're dysregulated?
Yeah. Um, the way people show up with one another relationally when they're dysregulated is usually not great because it's hard when you're dysregulated to have your prefrontal cortex, which is the more developed part of your brain, be online and talk to your partner or partners or, people that you're in relationship with from a place that's grounded, centered, balanced, or whatnot. So when you're dysregulated, what might come forward is the part of you that is angry, the part of you that likes to blame. You always, you never, you this, you that. When you're regulated, you might say, honey, when I see that there's no milk in the refrigerator and we had had the conversation about you going to the store, last night, and there's no milk today, the story that I make up about it is that I'm not important to you, that my needs don't matter, that shared household responsibilities aren't a priority for you. And I feel sad about that, a little bit disappointed, um, and maybe a little resentful. Um, what I'd like is to know if you would be willing to get the milk today on your way home from work. Because I love you and I value our relationship, and it helps me feel safe when I know that the contracts we have with one another are honored, right? Very different conversation than you never bring home the milk, or you said you'd do this and I can't depend on you, and I've had the kids all day, and whatever, right? That's when you're dysregulated and you're interacting relationally versus when you're more regulated. And people are like, nobody talks like that. I could never talk like that. Gee, Francesca, it sounds good when you say it, but how am I going to say that? Well, it's because then we start to learn when I have the whoosh and you want to do the thing of you always, you never, I've been with the kid. When you say, you put your hand on your heart or your belly or whatever, and you just say, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to engage my parasympathetic nervous system. I'm going to look for cues of safety within myself by letting the part of me that gets activated and dysregulated know that my wise adult, my prefrontal cortex, is also online and here. And I'm going to use that to partner with and become almost like the caretaking parent of the part of me that's really pissed off or really sad. And so there's a little mini inner dialogue that happens, and we pause. It's a sacred pause that Tara Brach calls it, to give ourselves a little moment to reconnect with ourselves. And once we're reconnected here, then we can more safely engage relationally and not cause further damage. We're not like giving them a pass for forgetting the milk, but we are holding our ground and making a request in a way that is more relational.
Yeah. Yes, that was such a lovely example and really helped to picture the way in which, yeah, slowing down, taking a moment, and being able to respond in a way that's going to likely be more beneficial or just overall reduce the negative impacts that could happen when we might act out of that anger on a sudden whim. And I'm wondering, for example, in any given dynamic, if one person is feeling really dysregulated, does that automatically affect the other person, or can we essentially prevent someone else's dysregulated regulated state from affecting our state?
I mean, yeah, I think that there's degrees, right? So, like, I mean, we're human, so we're a little porous, and even if we're like super stoic, or even if we're like the Dalai Lama, like, does he? I mean, he's admitted he gets angry, sometimes, but does he act out of his anger? Does he behaviorally act punitively toward other people? I don't think so. I think he's aware of the fact that he can get angry, and then he is with his anger in a way, tending and befriending it, accompanying it, understanding it, letting it dissolve and, you know, metabolize and kind of getting curious about what it's here to tell him or teach him. I mean, I don't know, I'm imagining this, but this is sort of what the process would be, I think, with anybody who would be sort of trying to work toward emotional regulation in, you know, service to better relationships. That's the piece that we don't act from the angry part or the angry place. We sort of tend it first. So do we all have to get contaminated by the other person? It's certainly not pleasant when someone else is that way. And sometimes we can say, I'm noticing that I'm getting activated because of this sort of tornado over here. Or maybe it's super icy. Maybe it's somebody who's just like really withdrawing or like won't talk to us or getting the silent treatment. There's like not enough there, and it's activating our neglect trauma wound or something from childhood. We can say, "Whew, something is going on in me. I'm taking a time out. I'm going to go walk around the store. I'm going to let them know I'm taking a time out on myself because I'm feeling dysregulated right now." You don't have to tell them what they're doing. You can say what you're about. And you can go to the coffee shop and walk around the block and whatnot. And you can check in with them 20 minutes later and say, I'm still feeling activated. I need another 20 minutes, but I'll check in with you in another 20 minutes. So 40 minutes go by and you're starting to say like, okay, I'm holding myself in positive warm regard. Whatever's going on over there, they're being frigid. They're not talking to me. They're stonewalling or they're stomping around the house and it's evoking not, the neglect of my parents, but like the conflicts that my parents had or something like that. I'm able to kind of be with that a little bit. I can understand that and process that. And when I feel like I've been able to be in touch with the root of that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's just them. They're having a bad day. And I can come back. I don't have to take it so personally. My body feels a little bit safer. Um, and maybe I don't come back. Maybe I say, you know what, I need another couple hours or whatever. But that whole piece is kind of the detente or the de-escalation that we can bring, even if somebody else is coming into the room with Terry Real, the relational life therapy model creator that, some of the stuff that I'm talking to you about today is based on, that he says putting out a stink. Somebody wants you to know that they're in a bad mood for something, and we don't have to just allow all of that to be absorbed. We can have limits and boundaries around what we take ownership of and what we don't. So we can have accountability when we are responsible for something that was a failure in the relationship, but we can also, just say, that's your story about me, but it's not the only or the complete story about me.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for diving in there a little bit more. I was really interested to hear about that, and you explained it so well. And just shifting gears towards specifically just regulating our nervous system in general, you've shared a few different things that we can do, whether it be taking that walk, getting space, or getting curious, taking a moment to pause in an interaction. Is there anything else you could share with us about how we continue to regulate our nervous system?
Yeah, I mean, there's different things that people do. A lot of times people do this thing called box breathing where they breathe in for the count of four, hold for four, breathe out for the count of four, some sort of rhythm. Or sometimes they do it where they breathe in three, hold for three or four, and then breathe out for four. you know, there's a nice way of engaging the parasympathetic branch of the vagus nerve that can help reset our nervous system when we kind of do that. So that's just allowing the body to just slow down, right? Kind of more diaphragmatic breathing. Sometimes when we get dysregulated, we get caught in some story about the past, some traumatic event or something in our history. And sometimes it's our personal history, sometimes it's actually intergenerational trauma or ancestral trauma that you know, we may not even know that we're carrying. Um, but in order to bring ourselves into the present moment, we can orient to the present moment by looking around the room and sort of giving ourselves an opportunity to say, oh, it's June 25th, 2025. It's not, 1974 when I was 4 and this was going on and with my parents and I felt neglected or whatever. And we can ground ourselves in saying, okay, like, I'm looking at my plants. I'm looking at my cat. I'm looking at the things that bring me joy. I don't just have to focus on that negative experience. I can orient toward the present moment. Another thing is people can do resourcing where they've created an idea of what brings them the most pleasure, where they feel most peace and at ease. For some people, it might be their favorite beach or their favorite mountain cabin or the grandmother that they knew loved them unconditionally, that would give them hot chocolate and sing lullabies. And we bring that in and that imagery in, and our nervous system doesn't really know the difference between the imagery that we're importing in our brain and turning our attention to and what's actually sort of happening. So it feels soothing to us to recall those memories and those images and whatnot. And then the last thing is people can touch, 5 things or name 5 things they see or 5 things that they taste or smell or hear to again bring them more into the present moment and get them out of that like trauma dream, that, sort of activation that just feels so overwhelming. I mean, those are just some simple exercises. There's a couple more on my website that I could point people to later if you want, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, lovely. I always enjoy hearing about some really practical exercises that can help, in almost any situation, just bring some calm into our nervous system and into our bodies. And I'm wondering, do you ever find that some people are perhaps relying or hoping for someone outside of themselves to regulate their nervous system or help them regulate their nervous system?
Yes, and it's difficult because as children, as babies, like they call it the fourth trimester. So as human mammals, we actually have babies prematurely. The fourth trimester is very dependent. So infants cannot survive on their own if you're a human mammal that's born. You need not a terrible amount, but what I mean by terrible is a lot, an amazing amount of TLC. And that involves touch, that involves obviously food, clothing, shelter, nourishment, but it also involves this relational aspect of attunement. And there's a lot of research on this, and, attachment theory is born out of this, but it's basically being taken in by your loved one and you taking them in and delighting in one another's presence. So it's the mom looking at the baby and, oh, do, 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 oh, bop, bop. Oh, are you talking to me? You're talking to me? What are you saying? I don't know. I don't know. And the baby goes, da, 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 da. And the mama goes, ah, da, 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 right? It's this interactive sense of connection of I am seeing you reflected in me. You were once part of me. We were connected with the umbilical cord, right? And this is for biological moms, but this could be true of any caregiver of, to whom we are receiving attention and care. So it could be a nanny, it could be, an adopted parent, it could be a big sister or a grandparent or whatnot, but that the child, the infant, is longing for that kind of touch and connection and nourishment and seeing itself as capable of being delighted in the eyes of another. And that along with all the other necessary things like nutrients and warm clothes and, proper, medical care and things like that, that's the foundation of relational security, what we call secure attachment moving forward in life. And there are some people who have that growing up, and a lot of us don't have that when growing up. We're either a little overburdened where we feel smothered and like somebody's like always in our face. And so we kind of learn as an adaptive strategy, unbeknownst to us, to kind of pull back and, maybe our humans don't feel so safe to us, or maybe we're neglected. They're like, oh, you're fine. I fed you. I don't need to touch you and hold you and bounce around with you and look into your eyes and take you in and look away and come back. I need to just like make sure that like you have clothes on your back and a bottle. That's also going to have an effect where the person might be like reaching for someone all the time. Where are you? Where are you? Right? And then maybe after discovering that the person isn't there, they give up and they're resigned and they just kind of feel depressed or and they might end up with a story where I got to do everything by myself. I can't have access to my emotions. It's too painful. So when those are adultified, those people act out of this place of feeling like they have anxious attachment. They're preoccupied with someone else on the outside. They don't have a lot of access to being able to regulate themselves because they're looking to be regulated outside to the point of your question. Or they're just cut off from, I'll never depend on another person for regulation. I'm just going to withdraw. I'm going to be independent. I'm going to be autonomous. I don't really need anybody. But of course, we're relational creatures and we do. So these attachment styles and ways of relating to other people are kind of born in kind of the way that our nervous system is programmed or conditioned or, whatever it's exposed to growing up, good or bad. Um, it's really more about attunement and did we get enough of what we needed? And each baby is unique. Everybody's different, and everybody's circumstances is different. So we're not saying people's parents are bad people. We're just saying, sometimes we get more or less of what we need. And so in marriages and partnerships and relationships, when we're acting from that place of still trying to get what we needed back then, that can be problematic in our 40-year-old selves or 20-year-old selves or 50-year-old selves. It's for us to kind of do work around exploring what it is that we didn't need and owning what's old and then owning when it gets pricked up in our current relationship because it's sort of triggering old wound, and then reminding ourselves, oh, I survived that. That actually did happen, but I'm able to take care of myself now and show up in a different way. And rather than suffer silently, I'm going to ask for what I need from my partner because they love and care about me just like I love and care about them. Whereas confrontation before might have failed. Maybe there was no one there, so they gave up and decided it wasn't worth it. So that's sort of the arc of healing.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you for diving in there. And yeah, I think you explained it so well to get a better handle on why we might, as for example, our 40-year-old self, still have some of these patterns that came all the way back from our childhood. And it's just never been something that we've changed if we haven't put in the mental, emotional effort to shift it or alter it. And I'm just wondering, as a whole, an overarching question for today, how can we show up differently for ourselves, for those around us, and just show up differently in our lives when we are in this more regulated state and continue working on becoming more regulated?
How can we show up differently when we're in a more dysregulated state? And then how can we show up more regulated? Is that the question?
No, like when we begin this work and when we begin regulating, how is that going to shift the way that we're able to show up in our lives?
Oh, got it. Yeah, well, I think things will go better for you. You might not always get what you want, but you'll be able to tolerate disappointment and say, it is disappointing. And I do feel a little bit of pit in my stomach, but I don't have to go off on a story about I'm not lovable, nobody cares about me, nobody loves me, nobody ever does anything that I need or ask. It's a failure. I shouldn't bother anymore. We don't have to go into this whole story of depression. We just say, I'm holding myself in positive, warm regard. I'm enough and I matter. It's okay. I'm still present and I can be here for myself. And I'm able to kind of recognize that, yeah, it's a blip. we're not going to go to that concert, or they did forget our anniversary, or whatever. But I'm okay. I can survive that. And it's okay for me to be disappointed. And I can let my partner know that I'm disappointed, but I can do it in a way that says, I want to move back into repair and reconnection. So here's what I need to feel like we can be reconnected and repair. Can you offer me that in service to our relationship where we love one another and cherish one another? And that's really the move. So when you're regulated, you can deal with distress tolerance better and differently. When you're dysregulated, it's a lot more brittle. It's harder.
Yeah. Yeah, lovely. It's great to hear some of the more empowering aspects that can come from this and being able to stay more calm or not act out of a really angry place. And so, yes, loved hearing about that. And I would love if we could talk a little bit about how people can dive deeper with the wonderful work that you do, Francesca. I know you have a free 15-minute consult as well as the possibility of a 60-minute somatic session. And we have buttons below leading over to both of those different options if you'd like to just tell us a little bit about each of them and what they entail.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a 60-minute somatic session is just actually having a session with me. So if after doing a consultation we decide to work together, then that's what that would look like, the somatic session. And I'm licensed in New York, Florida, and Massachusetts, so it could be a somatic psychotherapy session or anywhere around the world or around the US. It could be for a somatic coaching session. The 50-minute consultation is really just to kind of see what are your problems? Where are your pain points? What are you having challenges with? Where do you feel stuck? What is it that you're facing challenges on? And then we kind of make an assessment to sort of see like what might be helpful as a remedy. So it's really just sort of a little introduction as to um, what might be helpful or needed to help address some of the stress that you're facing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing about that. And as a reminder to everyone watching or listening, you can click the buttons below and check out that 15-minute consult with Francesca. And then, are there any final insights or perhaps a final message that you would like to leave us with today, Francesca?
Yeah, I would just like to say that human beings are wired for connection. We are relational creatures. We are interdependent. There is no way that, as John Donne said, no man is an island. We're not. We coexist. And yet we live in a culture that is sort of a Western European kind of um, rugged individualism, self-determination kind of culture, which has a lot of good points around endeavoring and earnestness, or in Pali, I think they call it virya, which is like the energy of like motivation to do things and accomplish things. I think those are great qualities. But I think sometimes we go too overboard on that and we forget that like we're actually a need-based mammal that like can't exist without interaction. So this concept of nuclear families and this concept of living on your own and doing all these things, I mean, rarely do we have intergenerational homes anymore the way that we used to for thousands of years, where grandparents live in the same home as the parents, live in the same home as the brothers and sisters, and maybe an aunt or an uncle, as well as the grandchildren, right? Like that there was like a built-in babysitting system in a way, rightly or wrongly. Um, and so I guess it's holding both and, which is acknowledging that we are living in a world that celebrates this individualism and self-determination and autonomy, and that's fine. We're not getting away from that. But we also want to be open to being labile enough, flexible enough to remember that we are interdependent and that we're relational creatures, and that without that, we die of loneliness. People in the US die of loneliness at astonishing rates, especially men when they get older in their 70s and whatnot. The suicide rates skyrocket, especially for white men. Um, and we don't need to be that way. But in a culture that doesn't allow vulnerability, doesn't allow self-disclosure, doesn't allow self-intimacy, because we're sort of taught to cut off from our own emotions when we have faced difficult histories, and we aren't taught what we need to kind of come forward and move through and be able to be a new friend to ourselves, to kind of reparent ourselves, it can feel really despairing. And so we kind of just give up a little bit. And I want to honor that, that feeling too. But I want to offer hope that making connection safe again, to Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory, where he talks about ventral vagal, social connection, safety in the arms of another, that this is possible. And we want to try that out in small doses, and remember that not everybody's unsafe, not everyone's out to get us, not everybody has a bad story about us, that we can start to import that in ourselves for ourselves. And then we can also open the possibility that, like, yeah, they looked at me with side eye, but maybe they weren't really looking at me with side eye. Maybe it was because they were thinking about something that was pissing them off and I was in their line of sight. Like, right? Like, we don't have to take it all on. So that would be my last piece around that.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that final message. And thank you for joining us at Avaya once again, Francesca, and sharing all of your amazing wisdom with us today.
My pleasure, Brielle. Take good care, and thank you to everyone who's watching.
Yes, thank you. And yes, thank you to our Avaya students for joining us today. And we will see you all again real soon. Take care, everyone.
Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.